So for this video, we're really moving into the important stuff of once we've got our model designed, is bringing in the image textures and wrapping them around our objects to make things look more realistic. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than some of the other tools that we've looked at, so I'll take you through it as slowly as possible. It also asks a few more demands of your computer, so there's a good chance my Mac might crash, as it has been doing a little bit in these videos, simply because there's so much going on. So if the video has some bizarre cuts in it, it's because my computer's crashed or stopped working or responding. So you can see here that I've got a basic shape of a building, a square building, and it's made up of these brick walls, which is basically a texture which I've mapped to a two-dimensional wall, and then I've just used a little bit of extrude to extrude a space in there where I might put a window, for example. I haven't put any door spaces in, but this is just showing you essentially what we'll be doing in this video. One thing you do need to realize is to get this view like this, you do need to change your view options from the default kind of shading, which looks like this. You can't actually tell that there's been a UV map applied, and I've just gone to this materials map. And this is where it takes a little bit more power out of your computer to get things to work okay. So this is kind of what we're looking to do. What's really important here as well is that the texture which I've wrapped on here isn't something I found on the internet. It's actually a photograph I took today near my house of an old brick wall in Tasman Street. So what I do also want to kind of reiterate to you is that you need to be creating high resolution image maps. So just downloading and using images from the internet's not going to mean you're not going to be so successful with what you're working at. So I'll just pull up Photoshop and show you kind of the original source image I had, and I've just edited it slightly, simply because it's not facing to me in a perfectly perpendicular view. It's slightly leaned back, so I've done a little bit of free transform to try and fix that, and this is going to be the texture which I wrap around my object that I make. Here I've called it Red Brick Wall. I did a few other images here of some other images I could use for maps in the future as well, but this is the kind of brick wall I'm going to project onto my model, which is here. Now, this model is actually made up of a series of simple brick walls I've made and just been duplicated a few times. So to make this, I actually just began with a single brick wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this, and then I'm going to open up my original brick wall, which is this file here, and we can actually have a look at that and see how it works. So essentially what I've done here is I haven't got any texture on it, I haven't placed any material on it. All I've done is just with a simple cube created what basically looks like a wall. Now the next step is the same as we did for the materials previously. It's to add a material, but in this case, instead of defining a color as a material, I'm actually going to define the image as the material to be applied to my object, in this case the wall that I've made. So process is the same. Hopefully it'll go to plan. There's a little bit of finicky things you need to do when you get the texture on, or the image on. Image and texture kind of mean the same thing, and essentially what UV means is basically putting a two-dimensional image onto a three-dimensional object. So when we think of X, Y, and Z, those are coordinates that we work with in 3 dimensions, and U and V is basically a two-dimensional space or object which gets projected onto the X and Y axes of your model, if that makes sense. And I think it will as I go through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go down over to my properties and bring up my material properties. At the moment there's kind of a default material on my object, and just like the previous video, I need to add a new material in order to bring in my image. So I'm going to click on new material, and I'm just going to call this red bricks because they're red bricks, and essentially that's all the same. I'm going to go to surface. I'm going to change my surface here to diffuse just because it will show the image better, exactly like we did in the last exercise. So you can see I've got two materials here, one the default material and another one the red bricks, and this is the color. So in the last video we looked at defining a color here. Now this time we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to bring in an image, and to bring in an image instead of a color, we just come over here to the right hand side and click on this little dialog box. I'm going to go to texture. Although it says brick texture there, I'm going to go down to an image texture. And this is what we're going to be using primarily for our buildings. We're going to be creating some graphic images in Photoshop and using them as image textures. So I'm going to click on image texture. It will bring up these little settings. We're not going to play around with them or change them at all. But what I do need to do is I just need to click on open image and navigate to the folder where I have my images. Now this will be really important when it comes time to hand in your work, that you need to have your images folder inside your Blender files folder, because if you don't include your images when you hand your work into me, nothing will kind of appear. So file management's really important. So I'm just going to go to my desktop and my Digital Studio 2 folder, and I've got my images folder here, and I've got a subfolder in here called building textures. So I've got quite a few of them. These are just like the photos from my phone which I took today, so I haven't edited them in Photoshop yet, but I have this one called red brick wall, and I'm just going to click open image, and that will open it up. It means that's now my material that I can use for my model. And if I click on preview, what it should show me is a kind of shaded view of what it will look like. You can see the bricks are there. So now if you remember the way that we applied the materials to our previous model, which was just the colors, it's essentially just really selecting the object in object mode. I'm going to go over to edit mode so we can see that we have all the different faces to work with. And in this case, I'm going to apply the texture to everything. And it's going to look kind of ridiculous and kind of wrong, because it's just going to kind of apply the image over the entire thing, and it's going to try and fit all the faces. And remember, there are 6 faces on this object. It's going to apply them all kind of equally to the object, so it's not going to look quite right, and the bricks are going to go in the wrong direction. And what I'm going to need to do to correct that is do a thing called UV unwrapping, which is to separate out all the parts of the object here which is selected and define them to the bricks. Now I could do the same thing by choosing one face at a time, but in this case I'll just apply it to the whole object, which will mean that you'll kind of understand the concept that I'm talking to. So with the object selected, I'm going to go make sure red bricks is on and click assign, and that will apply it to it. Now you're not going to see anything at the moment because we're still in our solid model, so I need to go to the material preview, and you'll see, yeah, those bricks don't quite look right, do they? They're going sideways and they're really enormous. And the reason for that is that on the model, it's kind of unpacked all the areas of the model here, all the 6 faces, and just applied it to the full image. And you'll see much better when I open up the UV editing box. I'm just going to open this up, which will open up a second window, and I'm just going to scroll out a little bit with my zoom wheel, and hopefully what you can see here is we have these 6 faces. These represent all the faces on the model, and they've just been applied and wrapped around my object here. I'll just turn it on so you can see how they look. Okay, I've just had a couple of major meltdowns in making the video tutorials, and part of it's because of the demands from the computer from putting these high resolution image maps onto my object. So hopefully this is the 4th time I'll be able to go through and explain this video in some detail. I've closed every other open application on my computer, so hopefully it will work a little bit better. So as I was talking about at the end of the last section of the video, I've made the material and I've applied it globally to my model, and essentially the graphic you can see here is all of the faces of this object with the brick texture applied to it. And because it's trying to fill the entire object with the bricks, that's why these are pointing the wrong direction and too large, because it's fitting the entire object into one image. And what I want to do by doing this thing called UV unwrap is make all these 6 parts independent of each other, which means I can actually fill the entire surface or the face of the object with the bricks here, which is my intention. So a couple of things I need to do. I need to be in edit mode, and I need to choose face mode, and then I need to choose the face that I'm going to work with. So in this case, I'm going to choose this face, and you can see here how it's this part of the object selected here. And what I'm going to do is essentially unwrap it. So I'm going to separate it from the wrap which it came in. I'm going to do that just by right clicking and clicking on unwrap, and it will now just place the face across the entire image here. And if you look over here on the right hand side, you can see all of a sudden that everything's kind of lining up and the bricks are looking better. And essentially all I'm going to do is grab the vertexes here, and I'm just going to move them out to the edge of the graphic using the move tool. So vertex selected, move it out to the edge, select the vertex down the bottom and move it out to the edge, and it will kind of update it here on this side. So all of a sudden you can see that it looks like a much more realistic brick wall here. If we look at the back, because I haven't unwrapped the UV yet, it's still kind of on that default setting, and even these edges along the side and the top, I need to fix those as well. So I'll just go through the process again. I'm going to select the face. You can see this is the face here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to unwrap it, which automatically positions my bricks in the right way, and just use my move tool to position the vertex in the right place. And that will give me a good looking brick wall down here. So final thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to go through it quickly because this is where my computer has crashed a couple of times, is I'm going to repair the image maps here, because this is not what brick walls look like if you look at them from the side. So I'm going to select this face here, I'm going to unwrap, but this time instead of having a whole series of bricks across, the reality is when we look at a double brick wall, it's probably, and this isn't going to be perfect, it's probably only going to be, double brick walls are about the width of one brick, so I'm just going to use this one as the guide. It's not going to be perfect because of course they're not going to line up perfectly, and what I mean by that is that, like, we have some little cut off bricks here, and ideally if it was perfect there would be 2 bricks filling up that space. That's what the double brick walls look like at my house anyway. So I'm just kind of fudging it a little bit and hoping people who look at my model don't look too closely at the end or the top of it. So here's my end, and you can see it here. Or in my mind it's probably a little bit too wide, so I'm just going to select it again, and I'm just going to narrow the selection here. So I'm also thinking about it in scale and dimensions with the other parts of it, and that looks a lot better. It's not perfect, you can see they don't line up here, so I'm going to kind of hide it, but I'm just really going through and showing you the process where you can wrap on each face. So again, select the face, over in the UV editing, right click and unwrap. That will give us the whole object, and I'm just using the move tool to move the vertices to kind of line them up, and whatever changes I make here are being made on the actual model on the right hand side. And I'm kind of hoping that this doesn't crash at this point, because I'm kind of getting tired of doing this and having it freeze. And that kind of looks okay. So that's the brick wall going around. This one actually looks a little bit better, I think, than the wall that I have here. Yeah, I think it looks better on this end. So I could kind of duplicate it if I want. And finally, I'm going to select the top, and I'm going to do the same thing here. Right click, unwrap, and I'm just going to do a series of narrow bricks. Again, just by moving the vertices, and I'll just move them across here. I'm not being very fussy with this because in my mind I'd probably build a little bit of a roof on top or something to kind of disguise the top of it. But for the purposes of what we're doing, that gives me my really realistic brick wall. So just to go through how it works again, we create a material and we select a new material. So I'll just do this here. And select, so I've got a slot, new material, I'm just going to call this window because I do have that graphic of a window. I'll call it brick window. It's not to the right scale, so it's not going to look particularly good. And surface, we're going to choose diffuse, BSDM, and then the key thing here to bring in the image is where it says color. You come over to the right and click on it, choose texture, choose image texture, and then we need to go open to navigate to where we have our images. Remember, you need to make sure your images folder is in the same file as your building, otherwise when you hand it in it won't look very good. Choose the image, this is my barracks window, click open image, and that will create the object, and this is kind of my preview of it. Not showing it particularly well, but if I had a face here, I could apply it to it and have a look at it. And I might actually do that in another supplementary video to show you how you can kind of edit things, add new loop cuts and things like that, and add other textures and kind of multiply things to make a more complicated building. But it's quite a long video at this point, so again, you need to make the material, import the image, then apply the image, and then unwrap the UV. So there's quite a few steps to doing it, so you may want to watch this 2 or 3 times just to get the hang of it.